Well, Summit Ministries, we're the people who equip and support the rising generation to embrace God's truth and to champion a biblical worldview. Respected authorities like Dr. James Dobson and Josh McDowell sent their kids to Summit. They became friends of the ministry, and the ministry has grown to the place where this last year we passed 1 million students that we have been able to train in a biblical worldview. As you can imagine, the students who come to study with us these days don't have a biblical worldview to begin with. In fact, we're finding that about 1% of them come in with what we would call a biblical worldview. They've been trained in their schools to be pretty far to the left. They've been trained that socialism is easily to be preferred without any question over capitalism. They've been trained to believe that truth is whatever they want it to be, as if the compass needle always pointing toward them makes them feel like they know where they're going. And one of the questions they're always asking is, what is Christian about being conservative? Why do you guys tie these two things together? We can love Jesus. We don't have to actually have any political convictions that are conservative. Well, 2 years ago, I had the privilege of starting on the writing of a book called Truth Changes Everything. I wrote this book during a battle with cancer, and I literally had to ask the question, what if this is the last book I ever get to write? Is this the message I want to communicate? So in the book, I told stories of Jesus followers who changed the course of history based on one belief: that truth isn't just a set of logical propositions. It isn't just a set of mathematical formulas. Truth is a person. It's Jesus. And that one thing changed the whole course of history. It turned out, as I studied all of these great world changers in science and the arts and medical care and politics and justice, that they were conservative. But they weren't conservative to prevent change. They were conservative to preserve the core principles that make peace and prosperity possible. We should learn a lesson from them. These world changers did not wait around for the culture to give them permission to do what is right. They acted. And we could do the same thing today. When I work with students, they keep telling me, you know what, I'm not sure I should get married and have kids. Getting married, that's heteronormative bigotry. I can't do that. I can't have kids because it'll be destructive to the environment. Listen, if you're waiting for the people for whom abortion is a sacrament to tell you whether it's okay to have kids, you will never have kids. It is time to say that we don't wait around for permission from the culture to tell us when it's okay to do what is right. Let me just give you some illustrations of how these individuals preserving the core principles that make peace and prosperity possible actually changed the course of the world for the better. In the early days of sailing, people could put 100 to 200 tons of cargo on a ship. And if you've seen the size of these ships, that's pretty remarkable. They could put that much cargo on there. But in the 1930s, a very exhausted truck driver pulled his truck up to the dock, and he thought, here we go again. We got to take a thing off the truck, put it on the boat. Take a thing off the truck, put it on the boat. Take a thing off the truck, put it on the boat. Why can't we just put the truck on the boat? And he had an idea. After World War II, he took his idea and invented the container business. His first ship carried 56 containers, which transformed global shipping. But he did not stop there. Today's cargo ships, are you ready for this? Can carry 25,000 containers at a time. This not only transformed global shipping, it actually dramatically expanded the earning power of billions of people who now can get goods that would have taken them weeks or months to earn before for just mere hours worth of work. Peace and prosperity come about when we preserve the core principles. So what are they? I want to talk about two that emerged in the writing of this book, Truth Changes Everything. The first one is the value of every person as an image bearer of God. the value of every person as an image bearer of God. The secular worldview obviously does not support this. The secular worldview is best summarized by Marvin Minsky, the artificial intelligence pioneer. He said, human beings are meat machines. And if you go to Silicon Valley today, you will find that that's how they view it. They say, we're working with hardware, software, and wetware. You are the wetware. You are a bag of bones with money in your pocket. That is your core value. But that has never been a biblical understanding of our value, even among Christians who supported free markets. Luc Ferry, who's a French philosopher and atheist, and the author of a book called A Brief History of Thought, said this in his book, in the very first chapter: it is not to the Greeks and Romans that we owe democracy. He said, it is Christianity to which Western civilization owes its democratic inheritance. Why would that be the case? Well, he explains in the book that Romans they did not believe in democracy. If you were a majority culture property owning male, you would have rights. If you weren't, you had no rights. And it got to the place where, when you have a wrong worldview and it starts to go off track, it's devastating to the whole civilization. In their civilization, families would have babies, and when they would have a boy, they would say, this is great because a boy can be productive. A boy could possibly be a citizen. If you have a girl, that girl is worthless. She can't do anything. So you should have one girl as a souvenir, and then all the other girls you should just throw out into the street and let the wild animals come and eat them. You would say, how horrifying that they would do that. They didn't care because a girl was not a person. It's no different than, the rabbit that runs through the field. Well, the Christians, who in Rome at that time had come and started to grow in their community, believed that every person has value, even unwanted little girls. So they would go through the streets and pick up these little girls, nurse them back to health, and raise them as their own. Eventually, all the little boys grew up and realized there are no girls to marry. So they began looking around. Where are all of the girls? They're in church. So they went to church. Will you marry me? Only if you become a Christian first. The historian sociologist Rodney Stark called this secondary conversion. Kids today call it missionary dating. It's not exactly the same, but it is the thing that these authorities say changed the whole course of civilization. From the Bible, that every human being bears God's image. And the second one that I want to talk about is the rule of law based on rights given by God. You surely have read the Declaration of Independence. You probably read that regularly. In the Declaration of Independence, the text says that the government should be instituted to secure these rights. The government does not give you your rights. At best, a good government can secure the rights that are given to you by God. Now, a secular view says that works fine, it works fine, but when we don't like it anymore, we rise up and use violence to overthrow the system that we don't like anymore. Denis Diderot, Denis, I should say, he's French, was one of the leaders of the French Revolution. In fact, he wrote the French Encyclopedia, and he said this: man will never be free until the last king is strangled with the entrails of the last priest. Yeah, we're going to overthrow the system, and we're going to overthrow and kill everyone who was involved in it. And blood literally ran in the streets of Paris, something that did not happen at all during the American War for Independence. Why not? Because the Americans chose different sources. They didn't look to Voltaire and Rousseau. They looked to people like Samuel Rutherford, who was a Scottish Presbyterian pastor. In the 1600s, he wrote a book called Lex Rex, which is a really cool, simple, neat little title that in Latin means law is king. Law is king. Of course, his subtitle for the book was 136 words. So he wrote out this entire argument for the book on the front cover of the book, which publishers don't let you do anymore. But that title, Lex Rex, is so fascinating because at the time there had been a revolution. King Charles I had been overthrown. He was taken back to London, put on trial, and as they say, shortened by a head. Then the English Revolution came, and people got tired of the English Revolution, so they installed Charles II on the throne. He was very jealous to guard all of his power. He believed in Rex Lex. The king is the law. Whatever the king decides is what is right. So by writing this book, Samuel Rutherford was committing a revolutionary act. He was saying, we respect the office, but that does not excuse the misdeeds of the person holding the office, which is still the way we think of it in the United States to this day. But King Charles II was not fond of this notion because he wanted to do all sorts of things that were illegal, and he covered them by saying, well, I am the law. Rutherford said, no, you are the natural heir of Adam, and so are all the rest of us. Well, Charles II thought this was terrible, so he sent his soldiers to march up to Scotland and to arrest Samuel Rutherford and to bring him back to Parliament and give him a fair trial and then hang him. That was his plan. Rather rudely, Samuel Rutherford died before the soldiers arrived, depriving them of the pleasure. Among his final words were these: I have been summoned by a higher authority. At that moment, the horse was out of the barn. No longer could the ruler claim that they could do whatever they wanted because they were the law, that the law had to be written out and recorded. And you know, in many ways, the Constitution of the United States serves like those containers. It is what George Gilder, the economist, calls a low information carrier. By contrast, in the Soviet Union, nothing like that could have happened. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, in his book, The Gulag Archipelago, tells a story of a railroad commissioner who discovered a method for doubling or even tripling the load on a railroad car, which would sound fantastic. But the leaders of the nation said the only reason he's doing that is because he wants the railroad tracks to break down so that we will be open to foreign invaders. Plus, he's taking away jobs. So they shot him because he was an innovator. And then the next railroad commissioner said, well, I don't want to get shot, so I'm going to set in place limits to make sure railroad cars never get overloaded. And they said, you're limiting the success of global socialism. So they shot him. Only an idiot would ever take a chance in a culture like that. On the other hand, you have people like Samuel Rutherford, who was a Christian pastor, was not a revolutionary, did not want the kings and authority and so forth to be killed. He wanted the people to be able to rise up through good laws. Isn't that amazing? Just those two core principles alone changed the entire course of history. Well, what are they based on? John 8:32. Jesus said, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will, what? Know the truth, and the truth will set you free. As I'm working with this rising generation, I think about this kind of thing all of the time. The young adults I work with, 75% of them say they do not have a sense of purpose that gives meaning to their lives. 75%. 50% regularly struggle with anxiety and depression. Very few of them turn to a biblical faith for the solutions to life. But at Summit Ministries, we found that by the time they finish our 2-week training program, meeting with these thought leaders from around the world who will help them feel safe and then answer all of their questions, 85% have a biblical worldview by the time they finish just that 2-week program. So we should never give up and think it is not possible to communicate truth in a way that's persuasive to the rising generation. And we continue to study them 1 year, 5 years, 10 years out. The change stays strong throughout their lives because it doesn't just help them feel differently about God, it helps them see everything in the world differently because of their relationship with God. If you're interested in getting the book Truth Changes Everything, you can find that in the bookstore. But I'd also invite you to go to summit.org/Western, where you can see some of the resources that might be helpful that Summit Ministries can provide to you, especially if you know young adults who are 16 to 22. Jesus said we can know the truth, and the truth will make us free. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and God bless you.